Robots Radio presents...
Today's chat is brought to you by the support of all our Twitch subscribers. Through the patronage you provide the FocusFire chat team through the Twitch platform, we are able to provide you with the weekly podcast as well as the website and other aspects of FocusFire chat. If you have any interest in becoming a subscriber of the FFC and gaining access to some exclusive features over in the Discord server, please be sure to visit our Twitch account and click on the subscribe button. If you're an Amazon Prime member, remember that you do have a free subscription to Twitch every month that can be used for this. And for those of you who are already subscribers, thank you again for your generosity.
You may have heard the whispers of guardians gathering in the shadows, exploring the mysteries of this world and the worlds which surround us. We are all in search of truth. Sometimes we need to focus that search. Focus that fire. And so we come together. Welcome to Focused Fire Chat.
Welcome to FocusFire Chat, recorded live on September... Wow, I just blanked on my date.
18th. September 18th.
Jesus, I put 14th in here for some reason. I don't know why my brain thought it was the 14th. We're just gonna redo that and put that as a blooper.
Tuesday?
At the end of
Monday.
Monday?
It's just, I have no idea. My days are all blending together at this point. All right, let's try that again. Welcome to FocusFire Chat, recorded live on September 18th, 2020, over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. As always, I want to give a big shout out to our live chat here with us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us once again. This week's episodes are going to be focused around exploring the darkness and some of the updates that we've gotten with that particular topic. This particular episode will serve as what we have come to call the intro session of the week's exploration. Before we go any further, however, let's run through a quick introduction of who all we have with us on the show. As always, this is your host, Blue Crew 86.
And this is the Grandma Eva Levante joining Blue Crew for a time. No, not really. It's green. It's fine. I'm back.
We missed you last week because we had a chance to talk about sweetmeats and you weren't here.
Nope. That's what I get for sending Orchid to do the episode without me.
She was good. She was so good, but it was a struggle for her. There was a lot of times.
She said she had a hard time not derailing everything.
But last and definitely not least, in the hot seat as guest co-host, we have one of our good friends, DwyerFire. Dwyer, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How's everyone else?
The week is over.
That is true.
No, gosh. I mean, it's been a week. It's been a lot more happening in 1 week than probably should be allowed.
Yeah.
But we're towards the end of it. Technically, my week doesn't end until tomorrow night because I do a Tuesday to Saturday work week. But yeah, we're almost there.
And then you get Sunday and Monday to relax.
Yeah, and maybe go and do some hiking if the smoke isn't so bad. But, Dwyer, since you've been on the show already once, it's been a while, I do want to do, maybe a quick rundown. So, for those of you who don't know, Dwyer is a very close fire teammate of my own. We are both in Red Jack Network. He is a Titan who often does Tink Tink Titan with a little hammer. And screams for his little hammer if he loses his little hammer. And what am I missing?
He has a really good strategy. He has a really good strategy with Brachion.
No. Okay, so I have actually been trying to solo Izanagi's because the last step of Izanagi's Burden, which is the last. I finished Jotun, finally got Jotun. Only took me a couple extra years, it seems like. But I've been working on Izanagi's Burden, which is that strike. But it has the old Nightfall mechanic that if you die in the strike, you go back to orbit. And I have gotten to Brachion 3 times, and have gotten to the 3rd round of Brachion 3 times. And then as soon as I pop the head of the stupid goblin, I'm just effed. I'm just absolutely effed. And I blame Dwyer because I just panic every time I see the head come off. And somebody did it to me the other day when we were running strikes. It's like, what are you doing?
Shoot fast, shoot hard, and run for your life.
So Dwyer has a strategy of just Try to get rid of each strike boss as fast as possible. If you do this to Brachion, inside the Pyramidion, there's a fun little glitch that he does. He will chase you around the map, shooting sniper shots at you while invincible if his shield is up.
So you're stuck sitting on a plate with a giant goblin chasing you.
Not fun. Not fun. Anyway, I want to talk about Ghost, because the TWAB this week. So we have the TWAB this week that talked about having mod slots added to Ghost, and I know that Blue had some interesting thoughts on it, and Dwyer, I was curious about your thoughts. I'm going to let you go first on this one. Yeah.
I mean, you've seen me sit and scream and yell that I'm always out of enhancement cores and upgrade modules and every single piece of material known to this entire game.
Sure.
So the fact that I need to now infuse everything into a ghost to level up a ghost is going to drive me nuts. But I can finally have a ghost I feel like I want to use. So it's not a bad thing.
I just like how you can have a ghost aesthetic now. You can choose your aesthetic instead of just always getting a ghost that has the insta summon for the sparrow, or like that's mine. I always have to have insta sparrow because I hate holding square or X depending on your system. But now you can just kind of make that an auto thing for you, and I can pick, hey, I want this ghost shell all the time. That's kind of nice. Not to mention that planetary materials, you could pick which that, if you want that or whatnot. I'm trying to think of some of the ones they had as examples in the TWAB itself.
Well, planetary materials are going back. They're stepping it back, and it's going to be universal. So it's not specific to a single planetary realm.
That's good.
So that was actually one of my biggest things. I was like, thank freaking God, it's about time. So like they said, Ghosts are going to have 4 mod slots, and then there are 3 that are unlocked by default, and then the 4th is unlocked by masterworking the Ghost Shell, which is, I think that's really cool. But the thing that I really like is that this is yet another step towards like truly introducing an almost
RPG
transmog system into it, because you're actually, like you had mentioned, like you can actually have your ghost look like what you want it to look like, and also still be able to have the perks that, you know, those things should not be mutually exclusive. Like that's kind of the biggest frustration, honestly, with Destiny that I've had, is that there's a lot of times when there's like, I don't like the way this, you know, X looks, but because I need this one perk, I have to wear it, or I have to play at a disadvantage, which is why I play at a disadvantage a lot of times, is because I'm just kind of stubborn like that. But like, yeah, one of the big things that they were doing, the other thing I really actually kind of like is if you look at the screenshots that I think it was it Cosmo that did this TWAB. If you look at, first off, I love the fact that he managed to find a cat ghost, or the cat ghost, in his
It's the
TWAB.
bat ghost.
Yeah, it's the bat.
Oh, is it the bat?
Beautiful, beautiful bat.
Oh, whatever. It looks like a cat. I see it now. I see the little wings. I don't ever look at any of the ghost shells because I have the one that I have and I like it. But the flavor text on the seasonal mods is I really like it. This mod is fragile and will expire at the end of season 15. I'm like, that's really cool, because that's like kind of a nod to being like, yeah, this is going to go away, and it's also kind of like a really passive way of being like, this is why it's going to go away, is because it's a fragile modification. Yeah, he says so the destination specific material cache trackers have been transformed into globally effective non-destination specific versions of themselves for better utility. So now obviously he then goes on to say that the energy cost for those mods will reflect the increased flexibility, and the mods must be earned from various vendor engrams. So obviously the costs for those are going to go up, but that's because now they're going to be... Now you're going to have, like, you know, the one thing I didn't like about the Segura shell was that it was only useful for Mercury area. Like, you know, I like the aesthetic of the Segura shell, but if I wasn't playing on Mercury, which honestly, let's all be honest, I never really did, it really wasn't worth, like, it would only be there if I wanted it for aesthetics.
Yeah.
So I like that move. The other thing that I know they did call out was that raid ghosts look like they will be having specific intrinsic perks that will remain on them.
For the raids itself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Kill Tracker and Leviathan boss kill perks are the ones that they called out specific. They will remain intrinsic only on their specific ghost shells, which makes sense. Like that's kind of, I mean, I don't have a problem with that. The other thing that I kind of was really excited about, also really quick, as a kind of not related to the ghost, but a really big shout out to what they're doing for Matt Helsum. I really liked that. That's really cool. Matt Helsum was a employee over at Vicarious Visions who was really, really involved with the development of Mars, and he passed away, I believe, last year. And so Bungie is actually doing they're putting a quest on Mars specifically to honor him. So I think that's really cool. Elder Scrolls does things like that from time to time, and I always really like it when they do stuff like that. That's just, to me, that's really a cool thing to go out of your way to do stuff to kind of put it in memory. But no, so the other thing that this was really kind of brought to mind was way back in D1, Destiny 1. The legendary version of Destiny 1 came with what was called a Frontier Shell Ghost. And back in the very vanilla version of Destiny, the Ghost Shells hinted at giving the Ghost capabilities that were above normal. So you had a survivalist shell, you had a frontier shell, you had there theoretically was going to be a hacking shell. That one, I don't think that one ever came out. But there were shells that specifically in the flavor text mentioned that they gave the Ghost stronger capabilities to do a specific task. Like the hacking shell was better at opening things and cracking systems, and the survivalist shell was better at finding stuff. And I think that kind of transitioned into the mods that we have today, and then obviously the mods that we're going to be going forward. But I think that the other thing that would be really cool is to see, introduction of some of these mods, like a frontier mod or a survivalist mod. Like the naming of these mods, I think has a lot of potential to kind of feed into that RPG aspect. And I really hope they kind of double down on that, because I think that would make it even more fun to for those of us who like putting personality onto our characters, who aren't just being like the pew pew shoot things. It kind of lets you personalize and lets you extrapolate, your character from that. And I love it when we have that option.
They actually are applying it to all but one shell. And the only shell that's not getting that treatment is the generalist shell, which I believe is this version of the base shell in D2.
Yes. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I honestly don't even have a problem with that. Like, I think, because the thing is that they are, I mean, like what you just said, every ghost shell, regardless of tier, is getting this treatment, with the exception of the general shell, which honestly, I think if I remember right in Destiny 2, I think the general shell is like one of the only white shells. I think technically the triumphant shell, or the broken shell gets it, or is the white shell? Oh, it's a green shell. Okay, sorry. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, like green shell, but that makes me wonder though, do the other green shells, are they going to be getting this modification treatment? So could we actually start seeing like the IO shell and the EDZ shell? Like, because I mean, some of those green shells were actually, they were very, very basic.
Pretty cool looking.
They were actually pretty. I liked some of them.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yes.
We'll find out. It's going to happen soon.
Dancing in chat is 100% agree on that. Something like a librarian mod that can track collectibles leading to lore entries. That would be like, I mean, again, because you're adding these like, universal like modification options, you could, I mean, the possibilities are endless. I think that this is a very good step forward. I know a lot of people immediately were like, well, what about sparrows? And I think watching how this is going to get response to this change, I think will open the door to it, right?
I mean, personally, I think if we can get modified sparrows back, We should definitely get the SRL with it.
Oh yeah, no,
I just want
agree.
the horns. I just want to beep beep at people as I pass them.
What
I
was
really
it?
miss the horns.
What was the horn? What didn't we have? Wasn't the Dawning the one with one of the horns with the Santa sleigh? Didn't that one
Santa
have
one?
one?
Santa one, yeah, kind of.
It's just
Was that
kind of
the
like
fog?
It also
Jingle Bell
threw
Dizzy
out
Road.
Glimmer.
Oh, Jingle Bell. Okay, that's right. That was also the one that when you boosted it was the Glimmer.
Yep. Yet another thing I
You
never
just leave a
finished in
trail.
game.
Oh my gosh! Actually,
I just
speaking of-
refused to bake cookies.
Oh yeah,
I like the cookie baking. I think it's cute.
I didn't
But
have
it
too
also
much
just
of a
gets
problem.
like, no, I need to bake cookies to make a sleigh.
Yeah, obviously. How else do you make a sleigh?
Throwing hammers.
By throwing hammers.
Of course, you would say that.
The other, I mean, yeah. Speaking about that, like, gosh, the new items for Festival Loss are going to be. I like them. I think the new Sparrow that they have coming out, the new version of the broomstick, looks really cool. But yeah, so yeah, that was mostly my excitement. Like Ghost Mods is it's one of those like more aesthetic changes to the game that just help like bring in the immersion more for me at least, because it's kind of like, hey, this is, it's like it's transmog. It's like, this is my ghost and this is the functionality that my ghost can do, even though it looks like it looks like X, other ghost. It's also like it feeds into this sense that it's a ghost that has learned, through your adventures how to do certain things. Like it is pairing with you.
Oh, we're just putting in SD cards. That's all the mod slots are. We're literally just taking an SD.
I'm complete, but my point is that
like
you're able to synergize more with your ghost.
Sure.
Whereas, like right now, it's kind of like, oh, this is the cookie cutter, blah. Like that's not. I mean,
it's not a bad thing.
A ghostess with the mostess. That's good job. Good job, information. Oh, jeez.
You want to talk about any sort of announcements that we've got going on with the Lore Network and everything before we get into the show?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about it last week. So last week, you guys who are listening to live stream and will be listening to the podcast on Monday, you'll hear this again, so just bear with me here. But we are shifting over from the WordPress website. We're going to shift over and try out doing a subreddit. I think that's going to help drive up a little bit of the ease of access to everybody. And so far, actually, it seems like it's been met with pretty good reception. I've been talking with a couple of the I've been talking with Rhino and a couple other people about how the format of those posts are working. And everyone seems really happy with it. It definitely, to me, it makes it a lot easier to read comments. I think it also encourages comments because one of the things WordPress has a really nice, robust system. The problem with a robust system is that sometimes things get gunked up because it's overcomplicating things. So Reddit is simplifying it. It's taking it back really to more of like what it was when we started out with, hey, this is the idea. This is, what we've been doing with like the Destiny Armory Defined articles. I've been putting a couple of those on there and they seem to be really, really helpful. The other nice thing is it really helps us actually kind of reintegrate back into, I know this is weird, but the Reddit community, which, yes, there are some good Reddit communities. Destiny Lore subreddit is really, really good. We're really good friends with the mods over there. And so I can actually more easily, I am more easily reminded to actually cross-post and put things into the subreddits to help that. But so that's the other thing. So we're gonna try, we're gonna use it as a trial run. We're gonna see how the response to it continues to be for the next couple of weeks. If it works out really well, my plan is basically I'm going to shift things behind the scenes so that none of you have to worry about remembering a new URL. I'm going to take the existing URL. We're going to just basically redirect it because we own that. I've already confirmed it with everyone that I need to confirm it with, that it's not a huge deal to just redirect it. So that will allow us to maintain the functionality of the URLs that we have. And instead of going to one website, it's going to go to the subreddit. We are going to still have technically the WordPress site. It's just going to be a downgraded version. And honestly, most of my attention is going to be directed to the subreddit, which is also a lot easier because that means that we will have a much more centralized wiki. Reddit has really kind of embraced the idea of wikis, and they have a pretty good system. Been talking to Uni as well as a couple of people from the Destiny Lore subreddit about how to best do wikis. Right now I have profiles for every single one of our creators within the Lore Network up there. I will be probably looking at porting over our dialogue pieces, and then also because I'm talking to Uni, we might be looking at doing something with like the weapons expansion or the weapons analysis that he used to do way back in the day. But I don't know exactly where that's going to go. But the wiki actually opens the door for a lot of possibility that, to be blunt, WordPress just makes really complicated. But yeah, that's the big thing with that one. Let me know what, so obviously let me know what you guys think. The website is reddit.com/r/the-lore network. It's all one word. If you are familiar with Reddit, it is the Lore Network subreddit. You'll know what that means. You can search, if you go to reddit.com and just search for the Lore Network, it will come right up. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on that format, if you don't mind. Obviously you can I think you're able to subscribe to become a member to subreddits. I believe that is still the case. I'm still getting reacquainted with Reddit. I have not been part of Reddit actively for a number of years. So coming back, they have upgraded significantly the site from when I was last really involved on it. And I've been really pleased with it. It's also going to make things from a administrative standpoint a lot easier and a lot more streamlined because it's just a message board basically, which is really nice. But yeah, I think that's the big thing. Other than that, I think the other big news, and I can't remember if we made this announcement, but we did get Destiny Lore audio file is now on Spotify. We got that moved over to Spotify. I do know that with the shift in Google Play for their Google Music, that is affecting only music. I confirmed that Google Podcasts is still going to be around. So if you listen to us on Google Podcasts, I know there's a few of you that do that, you shouldn't have too much problem there. And I know that I just got notified that Amazon is doing a podcast-focused music stream. I haven't looked at it just yet. I just got the email literally pop up about 5 minutes before I got on air. But I know that Amazon has reached out to all the podcasters who list their stuff with their feeds and just given us a heads up that is going to be possibly coming down. Or not down, but a change is coming. That seems like it's going to be much more focused on getting podcasts up to the front and center of people's attention. So keep an eye out for that as well. I know technically we do have that as an avenue as well for anybody who's in that particular ecosystem. But yeah, I think that's it. I think that was my big announcements. Am I forgetting anything, Green?
I don't think so. Okay. It's the subreddit is the big thing. DLR, Destiny Lore audio file, is 6 episodes in. First episode of community submissions went up 2 days ago. No, yesterday. So Hypersyntax from he has his own podcast and I'm blanking on it.
VGX, right?
Yeah, VGX, video game crosstalk. That's what it is. But yeah, that's all the special announcements, and that actually brings us to our first ad break real quick before we get into the cocktail knowledge of the show. So we'll be right back.
Hey Guardians, we are the Destiny Show Podcast, a weekly podcast about all things Destiny 2. We invite amazing guests from the Destiny community to share their stories and discuss the latest topics from the world of Destiny. Check us out on Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, or live on Twitch every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. We will see you Starside.
And we're back. Thank you for joining us. It is time for cocktail knowledge. Blue, this topic is pretty broad in some ways.
No, it's not. It's just everything that's not the Traveler. Or is it?
Darkness.
Dun-dun-dun.
I mean, okay, so I don't know why you put the first in our show notes, why the conversation from Hollywood Reporter, which doesn't seem like it would pertain. I want you to lead me through your thought on that, and then I'm going to have Dwyer read.
Well, this was view. So like the Hollywood Reporter was actually a conversation with Robbie Stevens back in January of 2020. So this was this was before. God, man, dates. I'm doing terrible with dates. Like the whole working from home thing is really.
This would be 2020 would be before COVID.
So Shadowkeep. This was kind of like the lead up to Shadowkeep. And Robbie Stevens is the lead designer, or was one of the lead designers for that particular expansion. So he was kind of talking about. He was basically in process of that hype machine that Bungie's so good at, but he was talking to them about kind of explaining what's going on, why is this a big thing, and so the explanation that he actually talked about was in regards to the pyramid ships. He was explaining the pyramid ships and in a way started expanding on what the darkness actually kind of means, and so that's where this particular conversation. I took a quote out of that particular conversation because it was really there was a lot more discussed in it, a lot of like different aspects of what was changing, because Shadowkeep had a number of different changes there as well. But this particular quote that I grabbed was one that from a lead designer kind of gives you an idea of where they were kind of going, and kind of what they were trying to go for, I guess. Did you want me to read that quote, or did you want Dwyer to?
I have Dwyer reading the Darkness 3 quote.
Okay,
so.
perfect. Okay, so the quote that I pulled out is again January 2020 from Robbie Stevens. This was in the Hollywood Reporter. He says, "This is a large cosmic force unlike anything the players have seen before. It has its own intrinsic power and abilities that we're just scratching the surface on, and what the darkness actually means. The way the player interacts with the ship begins to slowly pull back the curtain on what these cosmic beings really are." End quote. So there's a couple things that, looking at going into Beyond Light now, we kind of see a bit of glimmer there about the hints of that. Intrinsic power, intrinsic abilities. Well, that would, that's stasis is one of the things that seems to be hinted at. The darkness actually means. So we're back into a Bungie that's actually talking about the darkness instead of kind of skirting the surface or skirting around the topic.
Right. But beforehand, the darkness was the concept of darkness being a force versus being an actual entity, and he actually calls out that these cosmic beings, like that is a somewhat soft reinforcement on the idea that the darkness and the light, if you're going to call those two separately, that they're actually creature-esque beings, cosmic beings.
So I get, and I mean, here's the thing is like, you can read it that way. I did not read it that way. I read it as that this is a cosmic being who does, the cosmic being that's being talked about is the ship, the pyramid ship. It's not the darkness. It is inspired by because like the darkness because he actually specifies that we're scratching the surface and what the darkness actually means. And then he re-specifies that the way the player interacts with the ship begins to slowly pull back the curtain on what these cosmic beings. And I read that as a reference to the ship, not to the darkness. I definitely can see what you're saying. I mean, like, and that would also kind of go into the next quote that I had, which is this reference to what's referred to as a Manichaean dualism, which I can explain after Dwyer reads it. But like the concept of a dualistic Gnostic situation, which would also tie into other themes that Destiny has, especially with the Ahamkara and the underlying themes there, the themes of the Norse apocalypse with the Yggdrasil tree. You know, there's a lot of themes that imply that these immensely powerful entities are actual beings, but you can also argue that they are not beings, and that's another thing that, especially within the advanced session, I know I'll probably go down a rabbit hole, because that gets into a debate on a very, very high level what the difference between the definitions of evil get into. There's depending on which way you look at it, whether it's a broad or narrow definition. And then, you know, looking at, like, is it moral or is it natural evil? There's two different ways that you could take a lot of what is going on. And the fact that if the darkness is an entity, that kind of points it to one side, whereas if the darkness is not an entity, that actually kind of gives you the excuse to look at it a different way. Which I think my reading this particular quote actually was the segue for me into the Darkness 3 quote that I went through, and I kind of picked the pieces from Toland's rant that actually are referring cohesively, because there's a lot of stuff that I had to cut out because Toland is very verbose. But like, he is talking really, really strictly about a dualistic model in which, you know, I'll just let Dwyer talk, and then I will explain what I mean there when I said that it's a Manichaean dualism.
All right.
That is an appropriate response.
To read this quote. There were two ways to be, and one of them one. All of this happened by the one law, the blind law, which exists without mind or meaning. This is why the universe is the way it is, and not some other way. Existence is a game that everything plays, and some strategies are winners. The ability to exist, to shape existence, to remake it so that your descendants will flourish, and others will find no room to grow. This is the shape of victory. To rule the universe so absolutely that nothing will ever exist except by your consent. And there is no reason for it. No more than there was reason for the victory of the atom. It is simply the winning play.
If anybody in our chat can name who he was mimicking, I will be thoroughly impressed. Not Sean Connery. I'll just
Did I get it
warn
right?
that one.
Did I get it right?
You did. He
Yes!
actually mentioned it in our Skype chat. Anyway, if you think you know the answer to this, tweet at me. I'll let you know if you're right.
I might throw an emblem in for a reward on that tweet.
There you go. There you go.
No, so really, what I know, everyone loves ragging on Toland, and I'm not really going to get into it because Toland kind of deserves some of the ragging that he gets. But he does have a unique perspective on the darkness, and to dismiss that would be to ignore a very, I'm not going to say reliable source, but a very knowledgeable source on the content or on the topic, right? So when he talks here, what is really kind of being referenced is best described as like a dualistic model. Within reality, within our world, there's actually a number of religions that kind of focus around on this, and one of the big ones was actually Manichaeism. Manichaeism was a very, very elaborate dualistic cosmology that was very focused on describing the struggle between a good spiritual world of light and an evil material world of darkness. So either you have the light and the darkness. And this was a cosmology that was very, very, very prominent between the 3rd and 7th centuries AD, so way back in the day. The teachings of Manichaeism stated that through basically an ongoing process that takes place throughout human history, light is gradually actually removed from the world of matter, so our reality, and returned to the world of light, where it came from. And the beliefs that were kind of taught within Manichaeism were actually very, very heavily based on local Mesopotamian religious movements and Gnosticism. Gnosticism is a topic that we kind of mentioned last week with the singular exegete. Eris actually calls out and kind of derides the darkness, who, in I believe it's contrast, she derides it as being, oh, that's so Gnostic. And it's basically kind of similar to where Toland, this is also the entry where Toland kind of calls out his disdain for people who are very teleological, who are people who are like, oh, there's a reason for this. And he's like, no, there's no reason. And that's that ending that Dwyer read, is there's no reason for it. It's just, that's the winning play. So while most of the Manichaeism's original writings have actually been lost, sadly, numerous translations and fragmentary texts have survived. So we actually do have some knowledge of it. The school of thought was actually last documented fully in 14th century southern China. And the reason why it was so far out in the east was actually because under the reign of Diocletian in the Roman Empire, he very heavily criticized and very heavily persecuted Manichaeism and pretty much stamped it out of existence for the most part within the Western hemisphere-esque area. Now, the other thing that this kind of corresponds to is a presentation within Ghost Fragment Darkness 2. So here, within Toland's view, we have this hyper-realistic or I just blanked on what word I want to use, but it's basically a steroid-infused Darwinism. This is like the ultimate form of Darwinism, of survival of the fittest. Within Ghost Fragment,
sword logic to an expert.
Sword logic is a hyper-violent form of Darwinism. I would argue that sword logic really is not Darwinism, because when you break down sword logic, there's a lot of logical fallacies that fall in on themselves, especially when it comes to final shape. Like that, I hesitate to call sword logic Darwinism. That is what Toland is kind of explaining here, but he's kind of trying to present it in a natural sense, whereas sword logic is a socio-religious kind of thing. Here Toland is actually using it in the sense of, survival of the fittest from a natural sense, like the passing of your genes into your descendants. He says that that's the shape of victory, to rule the universe so absolutely that nothing will exist except by your consent. Whereas sword logic would say that nothing exists other than you. You are the final shape. So there's a slight difference, I think, between what's being explained here and the ultimate form of sword logic that the Hive adhere to. The correspondence that I kind of pointed out here with Ghost Fragment Darkness 2 is that the speaker in Ghost Fragment Darkness 2, who we don't have a definition or an explanation of who, but the idea of evil is redefined as merely a natural event. And that's going to kind of tie into something that I definitely will get into more, probably in the advanced session, because it gets pretty detailed very quickly. But it's the debate between natural and moral evil. There's a couple inherent problems with it, and I will explain it then. But yeah, so that's where that kind of connection, to me at least, exists. That's why the darkness and light debate is both frustrating and also fascinating for me, because it actually is a debate that goes on in reality. It's hard because this is not reality. This is a video game, and so it's kind of hard not to connect dots that are connected in reality here. But I definitely find fascination within this particular presentation and seeing the figure of different characters defend the darkness, defending, I don't want to call them evil, but they're not necessarily our side. We're the side of the light, quotes on that one. And Toland's defending the darkness side. And then we also, within the singular exegete, we get theoretically we get from the pyramid ships themselves a kind of a defense of their own actions. I do find, I can't remember if I mentioned this, but I do find very interesting as well that with the singular exegete, the definition of singular exegete is literally the one translator of Scripture, or the best translator of Scripture. So it's very interesting that is the name of the conversation. It's similar to Books of Sorrow, The Unveiling, all that. Again, we have this very, very, very heavy religious connotation that's being put on these defenses. And then Toland's here, and Toland is an interesting figure, or is an intriguing figure, because Toland actually portrays a very similar philosophical point of view to a character from our own history. Again, I believe he was from Ireland, who goes by the name of John Toland. John Toland was very, very anti-teleological thought. This is very similar to the character of Toland's views of, no, there's a scientific, explanation. There's a scientific blah, this is the cause and this is the effect, and there is no necessarily no divine reason. There's not that. You can call it, you can see the deterministic process of this stuff. That's very much more Toland's point of view, which is also the intriguing aspect of why Toland adheres to the darkness, who seems to be very much more religious. In their communication, I find that kind of a curious dichotomy as well. But I'm going to kind of stop talking for a moment.
So John Toland is the real life version of that. But was John Toland? Is it a fairly true to form version of what we would consider Toland in game? I mean, man. Toland in game. I see.
This is a rabbit hole. John Toland actually is theoretically the author of a book called The Three Queens, a philosophical book that is talking about I actually have this written down somewhere in my notes, and I didn't have it. Actually, I wasn't planning on talking about this. But yeah, he actually, there's a lot of little connections to John Toland, to Toland's figure here. So I don't know if that's 100% the inspiration for Toland, but there are a lot of similarities with the way that Toland kind of approaches logic that we've seen so far in game, and then also the figure of John Toland as a philosophical free thinker. He was very, very opinionated about things, and those opinions got him in trouble quite a bit. But yeah, he actually does have a publication called it's either The Three Queens or The Three Princes. I can't remember, but it talks about the socio-political contest of wills between basically three different types of rulers, very similar to something else that we have from Toland in game. I found that really fascinating.
That is interesting. Okay, so we have Toland being the initial person talking about the darkness back in Darkness 3. We haven't even touched on the original darkness card in this episode. Do we still feel that it applies?
So I think with the quote from Robbie that we read first, my problem with your darkness card, and this is just my problem, is that it really doesn't. To me, it doesn't actually expand on anything. It's just a lot of different thought. It's like a lot of different theories, and they're not necessarily bad. But I think I get the feeling that the story kind of has gone a little bit different direction than where it was kind of being hinted at going with that particular card. Not that
I don't know.
Do you think? Okay.
I think there's still
Saint 14's position.
If you take it with loose,
yes,
right?
Saint 14's position is definitely kind of spot on, right? And I get that, but I think there's grains of, I think it's just like every other Grimoire card. There's grains of truth in all of them. Like Pajari's point of view can be also accurate, depending on what you mean. And this is another thing with the concept of evil. It's depending on what you talk about or what you're meaning when you talk about it. I don't know. I've always had a weird aversion to the darkness card. I don't know why.
I mean, I always like to look at it for, that's like, I feel the introduction to Ulantan and Ulantan's thesis.
Yeah, that's
So,
true.
When you bring that into it, it makes it where everyone always inherently thinks, like, we're brought up, you're a guardian of the light, you're here to defend the city and the last of humanity against the forces of evil, be it the darkness, the fallen, the hive, down the line. When you look at Ulantan being raised as a guardian and then having this other hypothesis where it's the balance that brings it in, I've always seen that as more of the theory. And if you go into stories from anything, be it the Jedi and the Sith, everything has that you need the balancing act. So everyone's like, oh no, the darkness is coming. And maybe that's the case, but that might be because of how much the Guardians have started expanding now. It's that nice weighing.
When I was trying to explain the concept to Julie earlier tonight, and I always try to give like a very not blue level explanation. Yeah. Because she describes Blue's versions. Yes. Blue's versions of describing things are like taking a graduate level class in lore. Me, I like the 101 versions. So explaining it to Julie, I went to the idea of, yes, you have to have balance. And for a long time, we've always had this idea that Guardians are light, Hive are dark, blah, like very binary ideas. And with the upcoming release and Beyond Light and Stasis becoming a thing, there's more of a play on the fact that balancing that light versus dark isn't necessarily as clear cut. And I know we've talked about this before. We've talked about the idea that Guardians are taking on kind of a darkness power. And I'm curious how they're going to play with that idea and how that will affect us. And if they're going to continue the idea that darkness is just a method rather than a good or evil. Because I know Blue, you're planning on talking about that concept too. And I was trying to explain to Julie, it's like, darkness isn't evil. You assume it is because it's almost always depicted as the bad guy. But it's a force more so than an actual active motive type thing.
It's the night to the day.
Yep. But I don't know how to dive back into your notes that you have here, Blue. Because you write notes very differently than I do.
Yeah, I mean,
where are we even at?
We're expanding on the discussion segment with the comments on Eris. So, like, I think the easiest way to dive back into the notes, to be honest, is probably we'll take a little break and then jump into my thoughts on the singular exegete, because there is a very, very strong connection between this topic and that topic for obvious reasons. Okay. So yeah, if you guys don't mind, we'll take a quick little break and then we can dive right into that.
Yeah, let's do it.
The hosts at Robots Radio get a lot of questions from people who are interested in starting their own podcasts about how they can start, how they can grow their audiences, how they can create good content, even what microphone to use and what software to use, things like that. Well, we're changing things up at Robots Roundtable to talk and share about the things that we've learned, the things that work and the things that don't. We're sharing with you our actual real-world experience. How can you launch a show like the Fallout Lorecast and get as many listeners as we did early on and rocket to the top of the charts on Apple Podcasts? How do you create a show in such a crowded marketplace as it is today, as opposed to 10 years ago? We're getting together every week to share our answers with you. Just look up The Podcast Professor, a Robots Roundtable with the hosts from Robots Radio.
Okay, so comments from Eris within the singular exegete that are really, to me, are very, very prominent when I talk about, darkness, is that she, within the contrast entry, she calls out the concept of, or the idea of, those who deny and excuse the existence of evil. It basically, because everyone here and chat's kind of talking about it right now, just because we don't like it, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. However, the point often is that, and I know chat is literally, they're scrolling pretty quick on this one. The presentation of the darkness as evil is something that you have to keep in mind the context of who is calling what evil. The fact that we are identifying it as evil just means that it is in opposition to what we adhere to as right, and it adheres to what we perceive as wrong. So that actually brings to mind a quote that is there's a person whose name is Karen Marie Moaning. I love this quote. It says, "Most people are good and occasionally do something they know is bad. Some people are bad and struggle every day to keep it under control. Others are corrupt to the core and don't give a damn as long as they don't get caught. But evil is a completely different creature. Evil is bad that believes it's good." And that's the end of the quote. And ultimately, what Eris is talking about within the singular exegete is that those who deny and excuse the existence of evil is basically a concept within reality that is called evil skepticism. Evil skepticism is a thought process that states that we should abandon the concept of quote, evil. And those who follow this line of thought believe that we can more accurately understand and describe morally despicable actions, characters, and events using more pedestrian moral concepts such as badness or wrongness. There's usually three different reasons for the worldview. The underlying tone within all of evil skepticism is the inherent issue with the attachment of metaphysical or supernatural commitments to the terminology. So the first one that they often refer to is the concept of evil involves unwarranted metaphysical commitments to dark spirits like the supernatural or the devil. The logic there is that if we don't believe in the spirits, the forces or supernatural monsters, we should only use the term evil in fictional contexts if we use it at all. I have an inherent problem with that. That's my personal opinion. And so there's like, I disagree with that there. So usually that's a moot point. It's a sum zero game for me, because that's one of those things that you're not going to convince me that my opinion on that is incorrect. And I don't believe that I can convince you likewise. So we're going to go to the second point. The second point here for evil skepticism is that the concept of evil is useless because it lacks explanatory power. A little bit more on that one. The logic here is that the term is unable to explain why certain actions were performed or why those actions were performed by certain agents rather than others. So this kind of goes back into the explanation of the darkness as this natural event, or this natural balancing to the light. The view here states that the concept is essentially what's referred to as a dismissive classification. It's the same as saying something is incomprehensible, and so to them, we should just not waste our time with it. And this brings us to the third point, which is actually directly connected to that. Because it's incomprehensible, the concept of evil can be harmful or dangerous when used in a moral, political, or legal context. So they argue that it should not be used in those contexts at all, if at all in general. And here is one of the few points that I actually can see a bit of validity here, because the logic here is that the concept of evil is particularly dangerous and susceptible to abuse. And such abuse can lead to a view that it is reasonable to assume that evildoers, as you would call someone who is doing evil, not only deserve the greatest form of moral condemnation, but also the greatest form of corporal punishment. And this is especially dangerous when combined with the fact that it isn't always clear what people mean when they use the term. One person can say evil and see it as actions stemming from malevolent desires or intentions, while another believes that it's possible for evil doing to result from a multitude of motives, even good ones. So you can actually do an evil action with good intentions, but if you are saying that action is still evil, it is the connotation that you are evil as well. So those are the three kind of evil skepticism debates that are referred to within the contrast entry within singular exegete. And the thing is like when you kind of compare that there, that's what Eris is actually arguing against. She is arguing against that, and she is using it as a way of basically, there's another really often used phrase, and most people will probably recognize this one: the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. That is basically what Eris's point is in Singular Exegete within the contrast entry, is that, you know, regardless of if we are strong enough to defeat it once and for all, if we just don't do anything, then it's going to win. And so Eris actually, you know, within Singular Exegete, Eris actually recognizes that she is being corrupted in a way, and actually doubles down on that with the caveat that she will not tell Zavala that she knows that she's sprung a trap, and that she hopes that her sacrifice is going to help people or help others, specifically the Guardian who is helping her. And that's, again, you know, when we talk about the darkness kind of stepping that back again, it's hard to say that the darkness is evil. Now, given some of the context within Singular Exegete, within Unveiling, the darkness refers to itself as evil. That is actually a logical problem that I will get into a little bit, because that contradicts the explanation of the darkness as a natural evil, by the mere fact that a natural evil would not be able to self-reference itself. Like that's not something that a natural evil thing is able to do. And I will explain that in the advanced session for sure, because that's a bit of a wibbly wobbly pathway that requires a lot more understanding of the definitions used within the debate of evil itself.
Okay, so the concept of evil, if we were going to break it down and just do it, you broke it down really nicely from just the different arguments. Do you think that the concept of good and evil is even applicable outright in the Destiny universe, considering the aspects that we are actually dealing with?
Yes. Personally, I think that the concepts of good and evil are always applicable no matter the context, because you're applying a morality to it, though. I am, because I am a thinking person. As a moral agent, I have a morality that I will apply to my existence and my experience of that existence. That's part of being what's referred to as a moral agent. It's part of understanding what is contextually right and what is contextually wrong. The difference is that you have to be careful when it comes to applying morality to things that are, and in this case, literally alien to your own context. And I think that's where where was it? I think it was Trigger said, from its understanding of our opinions, the darkness describes itself as evil. Like I can see that argument. I think that's a really poorly structured argument if that's actually what it's doing, because that's not the way to win from a diplomatic standpoint. Hey, we're your enemy because you don't agree with your opinion. I'm like,
no. If you think of some of the other entries from Singular Exegete in general, there's entries that talk about how they know that they're presenting themselves in a very specific way because it is a way that we expect them to present themselves, which I find fairly fascinating. Oh, yeah, and I do. And so for us to dive into the idea of the darkness explaining itself, or the pyramid, and you have to also remember this is in logography. Yeah,
logographic.
All these, it's a logographic message, so it's being translated by Eris herself.
Correct.
Which, if she is the quote-unquote quote prophet of the pyramids, if you want to take the literal translation of the Singular Exegete translation, she would be the quote-unquote prophet. If you put her in that position, you're also using her base language and her morality to help explain these aspects to us. So there's still going to be a disconnect, I feel, in how the actual interpretation is based off of Eris's interpretation versus the reality of what is.
Right, go for it, Dwyer.
If I may. So we can agree that Eris spends a good majority of her time just completely fixated on the darkness, right?
Yes.
Now, when we go through this book, does her fixation on fried rice make it inherently evil, or good to contrast the point of darkness being evil?
It's not the fried rice that she's obsessed about, though, Dwyer. It's the pineapple.
This is
But
true.
she needs the fried rice.
But she needs the pineapple to make the fried rice.
This is also true.
Which, who puts pineapple in fried rice?
Have you ever
I
had
found
pineapple and
one
fried
place
rice? That's
In
delicious.
Waltham, that does. It's amazing.
I'm not saying it's not delicious.
it's-
I'm just saying it's very, very...
It depends on how they
Unique?
cook it. No, it depends on how they cook
Yeah,
it. There's,
well, you don't see it very often.
oh, well, we have a number of Thai food places that do it with their
Yes.
pineapple. Like they
I
have
gotcha.
like pineapple fried rice, and it's freaking delicious.
Do they do the
Coconut
fried egg
rice
on
with
top?
pineapple.
It's so good with the fried egg on
Oh
top.
my god, yeah. It's the contrast is actually what makes it delicious. Anyways, speaking about contrast, Green, actually, I agree with everything
Yes.
you just said, but that's why I have a problem with the darkness coming back and being like, we're a natural evil. No, you're not, because you just structured an argument on a moral grounds where you recognize what you're doing as right and wrong. The fact that you are able to recognize that there is a right and wrong puts you into the category of a moral agent. And as a moral agent, you are incapable of committing natural evil acts. That is, by definition, not possible.
But, okay, so it's the perception of the evil acts, right? Like, that's what we're kind of getting down to, is the fact that it's trying to describe itself as evil while also saying that it's natural evil, which naturally
That would
the
invalidate.
order of nature...
Yeah, it would. You can't,
Right.
like, God. This is touching on my problem
It's
with
the
the
P53.
Yeah,
It's P53 all the great.
P53 metaphor is it's just it's a logical fallacy. Like you cannot both be conscious of self-aware and then say I have no control. No, you have control. You're just being lazy and not exerting control. That does not mean that you get a free pass for it. What it means
but the thing is that it comes down to choice.
No,
P53
it
does not have a...
Exactly,
Right.
which is why P53 is a metaphor. Like, I'm sorry, but it is a terrible metaphor. Because if you have something that has no choice, what you're saying is it's the same thing as a computer program, right? A computer program it will do what it is programmed to do. Now, you can argue that in the case of, mutually assured destruction, right? Okay, let's go full apocalypse. In a case of mutually assured destruction, the computer program would recognize a threat and eliminate the threat because that's what it's programmed to do. So the computer program itself is not evil. It is evil, but it is a natural evil because there is no choice within it. There is no recognition that, oh, hey, that might be a bad thing to do. It says it has data input and it puts out data. Now, the person who programmed that is a moral agent, and they are culpable for the decisions that are done as a result of their creation of that program. The action itself is evil. Now, the person who is causing that action generally will always come back to a moral agent. And if that is the definition of moral evil, if there is no inherent cause from a moral agent piece, then you get to a piece where there is a event that is considered evil that has no instigation from a moral agent. That is a natural evil. So like a tornado, a hurricane, to bring it kind of home right now, wildfires for a large purge. Now, if someone sets a wildfire, that is a moral evil because that has transcended into someone intentionally causing damage. But if it's a natural event,
choice.
that's just following the laws of thermodynamics. Like that's just a natural thing. And that touches on the fact that the world exists as a real thing outside of our existence. Now, with the concept of, yes, this idea of like the darkness doesn't have a choice. Sorry, but the fact is that it does because it recognizes that it has a choice. The fact that you recognize that you are doing something and that you can have an alternative is by definition your recognition of a choice. You are choosing to be lazy and not make the choice. That is a choice. Like you can't say at the same time that, oh, well, I was caused to do this because by recognizing what you are doing, you are therefore presented with the option to deviate from the path. Now, you can say, oh, well, I was caused to do it. And I mean, a lot of people probably would give you a pass for it, but that is not to say that you don't have a choice. You have a choice the instant that you recognize the options before you. And if you don't have, if you don't have a choice, you won't ever recognize the options. Like there is no option, like there's no precognizant thought process within choices that exists in. Like you can't be like, oh, well, we could go right or left, but I'm programmed to go right. No, you're just going to go right. Like you don't exist. The temporal existence requirement to be able to say, oh, well, there is X negates the ability then to be like, well, I have to go right. No, you chose to go right because you recognize the fact that there were two paths. If you didn't recognize the fact that there's two paths, then you are not a moral agent.
Right. Dino posted a quote from The Wager in Unveiling about where is it? Neither the gardener nor I know for certain that we're eternally universally right, but we can be nothing except for what we are. You have a choice. I mean, that kind of lends yourself. Okay, so here's where I have the cognitive dissonance. You've got your own reasons for it, but I have the cognitive dissonance between the we're actually having an actual conversation with something, and by having a conversation with them, they have the ability to choose their words,
Correct.
Which means they do have the option of choice.
Yep.
The problem with just the whole thing in general is that if Bungie is truly going down this line of the gardener and the winnower have no choice, it is just pure natural, they would never be able to tell us. They would never be able to have us have a conversation with it, either with the traveler or with the darkness or with whatever the light is of the traveler. So there's a narrative difficulty in trying to express it. And I don't know if
there's not just a narrative difficulty. This is an existential difficulty. Like, this is debate of evil. Like, I'm going to be clear. I have my opinions. I have very strong opinions about it. I will be 100% transparent, but they are opinions. And I mean, I also recognize that those are opinions. These are my thoughts from my existence and my exposure to different things. Mm-hmm. That's both the fascinating and the frustrating thing about this particular debate. There is no answer at the end of the road because we're still on the road. We're still going down the path trying to figure out what is going on. And as long as there is people, or as long as there are people who have the ability to do what we do and to cognizantly analyze the situation and make choices as they do, there will always be a path in front of us on this particular debate. Because this debate is not just about a game. This debate is about, ultimately culpability of actions. What does make you independently capable of being recognized as a moral agent? What is morality? I mean, that's a huge debate in and of itself that we have not even really touched on. Morality is, huge, very, very big debate about the relativity of morality. Like, is there a universal morality? Is there not a universal morality? What would that mean if there isn't a universal? I mean, the questions are just like splintering here. So that's why I can literally sit here and talk forever, but I know I'm going to get told to shut up.
And it's actually happening right now. So it's time to start wrapping up the introduction episode. Join us on the advanced episode if you'd like to continue this slight madness that we're going into. I don't know if this is morally evil or morally good to say that the next episode should be interesting or just having a conversation. Is that... Anyway, we're going to get into that. Final thoughts?
I really, for my final thoughts, I really like this type of conversation. Like, I love these debates. This is why I get into game lore, because games offer a way of safely exploring things that we normally don't. That's why I love role-playing games, right? Is because you can safely kind of put yourself in situations that are psychologically dangerous for you. Like, I'm not comfortable with X, scenario, but I'm going to go play on a tabletop game and, pretend like I'm doing it. And it's a way of broaching subjects that are, in reality, sometimes
thought experiments.
What's that?
It's like thought experiments.
Yeah.
It allows you to traverse that line without actually crossing it.
Putting yourself in the harm's way, basically. It's like things that are not necessarily comfortable, you can do that within video games, within tabletop RPGs, within, just like creative writing outlets, that type of stuff. This type of stuff, this type of conversation is why I absolutely adore reading into lore and analyzing the text and stuff like that, because this is the stuff that goes on in my head all the freaking time. So,
Dwyer, do you have any final thoughts on this before we scramble the brains a bit more later?
I think I will have more input for later. I'm still working through some of this myself. It's a deeper concept than it looks like on the surface when it comes down to it. Because like on the surface, you can look at it from the perspective of video game, good, evil. That's it. Nice and easy. But then like you read, and because Destiny does such a great job with the lore, it makes it that much more all the time. So it becomes into where you need that nice deep debate.
It does. And that's the nice thing about having stories in general, right? Like, if the idea of a story is to be able to help push your brain and push your understanding outside of what your normal experiences are. And Destiny does that. There's a lot of lore that does that. Heck, I've been watching Critical Role nonstop for the last week and a half, and they do that in their own very weird Traveler Con inspired way, which not PG, by the way. But anyway, we're not going to get back into it yet. We're going to wrap up this episode. Blue, do you want to take us out?
Yep. I just want to, again, really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your time. And until next time, remember, with wisdom we conquer, stand strong, stand tall, and keep exploring. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusedFireChat. Links to all our episode archives can be found at www.thelorenetwork.com. Please be sure to email us at focusedfirechat@gmail.com with any comments and or questions for the team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback and a rating over on iTunes as well. So until next time, focus your fire and may your light shine bright.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.